This program is brought to you by Mass Marketing, fueling the future of L&D.
Today's workforce is showing signs of deep fatigue, years of disruption, the pandemic, digital overload, economic uncertainty, political polarisation. People are becoming emotionally detached, cynical, and left wondering what role work should play in their lives. A report from Sponge calls this state Generation Numb. It argues that traditional ways of supporting people at work are no longer working, and that leaders need a different approach to help people find their spark and reconnect. To discuss Generation Numb and what this means for leaders and learning professionals, I'm joined by the authors of the report, Olivia Haywood and Josh Cardoz from Sponge. Olivia and Josh, a very warm welcome. The big picture here, you describe today's workforce as Generation Numb. What do you mean here, and why do you define a generation by shared experiences instead of age groups?
Hi, Rob. Great to be here. So, Generation Numb is the term we use to capture the state of the workforce today. Through our research and in daily conversations with our customers, we've been noticing a tone shift in the workforce, and there's signals everywhere to point to what we call a state of numbness. Now, we define generation not in the traditionally stereotypical sense by age, but by the time period effect of what they've collectively endured. We're in this post-pandemic AI era, and there's something very specific about this moment we felt needed to be captured because, well, we believe it's affecting us all. So numbness is age agnostic because we're all being asked to take on that next big transformational ask, worried about chronic uncertainty or overwhelmed by the digital world around us.
So if age-based labels don't hold up now, what's the risk for leaders who keep relying on them to explain workforce behaviour?
Well, just to say firstly, Rob, thank you so much for having us both on today. I think for me, as a brand professional in this one is really about a question of good insight. Whenever you're trying to take on any kind of engagement strategy, any kind of communication strategy where you need to engage with your audiences, it's so important for you to have a really strong sense of what kind of messaging is going to resonate with your audiences, what's going to capture attention, what's going to connect with them. And so if you are making false assumptions based on things like generational stereotyping, which is not backed up by very strong data, then you're going to often have some quite faulty data that is driving your campaign messaging, what you're trying to speak to. And so you're going to end up with disengaged audiences. And so really what we've been trying to do, particularly with the Generation Numb concept in the paper, is not just describe what Generation Numb is, how it shows up, but also why, so that you've got that deeper understanding. Because when you have that deeper understanding, then you're really able to tap into what's driving people. What are the emotional drivers behind decision making, behind the learning, and therefore you can create and put your resources into learning methodologies and communication strategies that will actually resonate and connect.
You highlight after years of disruption, people are numb to lofty corporate purpose statements. Why are traditional vision messages now falling flat?
Yeah, most learning teams that we're working with, they understand fully that you can't just transmit a sort of a what statement. You can't just go out and say, this is what you need to learn, this is what you need to do differently. They're all very aware that you have to back it up with a why. How are you going to motivate these people? But the thing that we've seen that's changed, and it's particularly relevant when in the context of Generation Numb, is that it's very typical for L&D leaders and even really advanced teams to go to their brand or their company purpose statements as a way to do this. So, brand purpose has been a key kind of organizing concept for comms for a really long time, whether you're talking about external audiences, your customers, but also your internal audiences, your EVP, etc. And they're often very laudable concepts. They're often based on kind of activism driven ideas or social equity ideas. And they're impressive and great concepts to work with. But in this context, what we've seen is that they feel a little bit tone deaf, because you might be sort of talking to your people about how wonderful it is that You're trying to put women in boardrooms across America, for example. But your employees are often thinking, is this new initiative really a coded way to say that we are reorganizing and my job's at risk? And so that sense of the disconnect in terms of motivation between an individual idea of what's my priorities, what motivates me, and the brand purpose is becoming increasingly distant. And we've got to tap back in, change our strategies to be much more aware of that context.
The report says 73% of employees have experienced disruptive change in the last year, 60% feel overwhelmed by the pace of transformation, and 20% report daily loneliness. What picture does this paint of the workforce today?
Well, a very numb picture, to be quite frank. Cynical, exhausted, overwhelmed, detached, seeking community. This is the picture we paint of the workforce today. Personally, for me, the stats about loneliness are particularly revealing because it goes to show you that it's much deeper than disengagement. And yeah, it definitely does feel a little bit doom and gloom, but this is what makes this a business imperative for any leader tasked with taking their people through periods of key change and transformation, which, let's face it, is most of us these days. But the good news is that something can be done about it for anyone who is willing to take it seriously. Because the thing about numbness is, when it's not taken seriously, it just leads to deepening numbness.
And that leads us quite nicely into what we can do about it. And you set out 3 stages for unnumbing employees: me, us, and it. Take us through them.
So we put a lot of thought into the way forward, and the more we work through the right set of strategy and tactics, the more we embrace simplicity. There's an element here of going back to basics, which is at the core of unnumbing the numb, that made framing our recommendations into 3 distinct phases not only practical, but also highly resonant. So first, address personal priorities in as much as you can in your sphere of influence. Then, bring people back together through community. And only then can you get people meaningfully rallied around the cause and break through the apathy through the right mix of agency, creativity, and imagination. But these need to happen in sequence. If personal priorities are not addressed, no one's going to be passionate about creating a culture of customer obsession. And within this 3-stage framework, we also set out to suggest tactics of high practicality for any leader task of transformation. I know it's easy to drop this challenge at the door of, say, the people team, but this is geared for people who need to get their team moving yesterday. And so it's inspired by the clients we speak to daily who are all tasked with such transformation.
And the report stresses that AI is often absent from your tactics, not because you're anti-AI, but because you're pro-human. A lot of people in business say this. I hear it a lot. It feels safe to say it, but can we really back it up? With so many creatives out of work and thinking about their future, is pro-human a real response to change or just hope?
It's a really important issue, Rob. I think the reality is that this paper isn't really trying to address that issue as you've just laid it out. So the paper isn't talking to issues of kind of existentialism around how AI is going to affect our job market or how organizations might reorg in order to cope with this incredibly life-changing technology that's come into our world. We have a little aside in the paper where very specifically we're talking about our tactics. So specifically in the context of when you are trying to deliver new learning strategies, new enablement strategies that are much more aware of this context of Generation Numb and your audiences, we've set out this framework, these guidance on me, us, it, but also really specific tactics about when you start to get into the methodologies for how you do this at scale in a large enterprise, how can you go about tackling this challenge? And so in that context, we are saying you'll notice in these tactics, we're often not looking at tools or tech or content that's AI focused. And that's because we are looking for ways to really solve for this Generation Numb issue or really make impact. You've got to have a very deep consciousness and deep understanding of what it means to be a human at work. And so you're not going to break through by kind of rolling out an AI avatar. something. That we just don't have AI related solutions that are going to help that. So very specifically in the context of tactics, what we're talking about is often when you're trying to address this issue in your audiences, you need to go back more to more analog approaches. You need to look at alternative. Often when everyone else is going right, go left. How can you start to give people a surprising experience in a way that makes them feel human and that they've been connected with on a human level? And we haven't seen great. There are a couple of examples, but there aren't a huge number of use cases for AI when you're trying to solve that particular challenge in your learning and enablement.
And the report does highlight examples from Google, Starbucks, Spotify, Virgin Atlantic, Chanel, and Ford. Pick one of these that's really stood out as powerful lessons for leaders.
It's really hard to pick one, but one that resonates with me in this moment is probably the Spotify example of chapters and guilds. We forget sometimes that our people are extremely talented and often have talents that go way beyond the job description page. So why wouldn't you want to lean into that more? The idea of guilds that can be spread to other parts of the businesses, little incubator environments, mini corporations, or just giving people the agency to flex what they are good at, it's just exactly what we need right now. More interdependency, more community, more humans getting to be human.
These are all big brands. What would you say to smaller organizations that want to apply the same principles, but perhaps on a more modest scale?
I would say go for it because actually in so many ways it's easier to do as a small organization. We've talked a lot about we've specifically looked at it in large enterprise, organizations that are dealing with thousands of employees, partly because that's where we gain a lot of our insight. That's who our client base is. That's who we're typically working with. So whether it's identifying these issues in the first place or looking at how we'll solve for them, that's our core area of experience. And it is a unique challenge in a large organization where you're dealing with thousands of employees and you're trying to teach them new skills or you're trying to get them to adopt new ways of working. And yet you're trying to do it in the context of Generation Numb. You're trying to bring that humanity in at scale. That's tricky. For smaller organizations, the same core principles apply. And you don't need enormous resources because really it's about tapping into that human experience and being much more conscious of how you're communicating in a way that is recognizing the reality of your employees day to day. You don't need the resources of a huge global brand to do that. Everybody should be doing this.
And in closing, your report talks about reading the room as a transformation imperative. But leaders are under pressure to deliver results fast. And this isn't a quick fix, it's a big cultural shift. So what's your realistic message to the business leaders and heads of L&D who are perhaps watching this program today?
Yes, we were very, very conscious when we were reviewing the data, writing the paper. What we don't want this to feel like is, we don't want to feel like an onslaught of you need to do 1,000 new things differently. And that's just incredibly intimidating and daunting. And also, very specifically, this is not about you as a learning leader or you as a person who's responsible for enabling your workforce. It's not that you're supposed to solve Generation Numb or its causes. It's simply that you do need to recognize it as the context within which anything you're spending money on, anything that you're focused on in terms of upskilling, enablement, etc., culture, you need to be doing it with an awareness of this. And if you're not doing it awareness of this, then you're probably doing things that are slightly outdated or not landing very effectively. And so your budgets are not being used in the right way. So I think what we shouldn't do is set it up as a dichotomy. You can shift cultures or you can drive performance. The reality is there's no magical solution for driving performance where you're not bringing your important people with you. And this is simply focused on, and Josh used the phrase earlier, within your sphere of control, these sorts of actions can really make a difference. And you can just do one powerful intervention. If you get this right in one powerful intervention and your communications land and you have that sense of empathy, we're on your side, we truly get you, And instead of it feeling hollow or artificial or superficial, it actually works, and you get that adult to adult connection in the way that you're communicating with your people. One good campaign can transform things because it sets up a completely different background to the way that you are trying to bring your employees with you on whatever journey you need to be going on.
And one of the most striking phrases in the report is, "This is getting the job done." Why is tackling workforce numbness not a distraction performance, but central to it?
It might be our favorite line in this paper because it is the non-negotiable part of all of this. So almost daily, we encounter customers tasked with large transformative change, building a culture of ethical decision making or shifting to more strategic selling. These are not simple shifts. And to really get the results you're looking for requires extracting that last 10, 20% of performance that you need to either outperform the competition or just simply stay alive. So there is a performance component here that you're trying to unlock out of your people through a critical shift in behavior, culture, and capability. So wouldn't you need all the momentum in your favor to get there? It's not that tackling numbness is a distraction from performance. It's that numbness is the distraction from great performance. So when we say this is getting the job done, this is the elephant in the room for unlocking that last missing layer of performance that every leader is currently seeking in this transformation environment. And that's why we say in the paper that really there's everything to play for here. And why we ask, how long can you continue to chase the change? And at what point are you going to start leading it?
The report makes a really powerful point. It brings a lot of threads together about human creativity at the center of how we tackle these challenges. The report's premise is clear. Understanding the big pressures facing workers today is the job of leadership, as you put it. Reading the room is now the core purpose of leading a workforce, and it means re-energizing people with honesty and connection. Thank you so much for sharing those insights with us today. The report is available on your site, and I'll include a link in the program notes for today. Olivia Haywood and Josh Cardoz, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having us, Rob.
This program is brought to you by Mass Marketing, fueling the future of L&D.